Susan is frustrated with the slowness of her network. And she's struggling. She finally convinces Joe, look, Joe, I know you've done good, and I know you want to be the technical guy, but we need some help. And Joe finally breaks down, swallows his pride, and hires a pro. Joe gets a pro. He gets a professional network engineer, a company who can actually help him with the growth of this network, because this thing's really going to grow. This is a growing company. And so the network professional comes in and says, okay, Joe, I see what you've done, pretty good, but I'm going to make some suggestions to you about something we really need to do. What we need to do, the professional says, is we need to segment your network. We need to divide your one big local area network up into two smaller local area networks. And we're going to do that with a function of the switch called a VLAN, Virtual Local Area Network. And so we're going to take your upstairs switch and we're going to make it VLAN 1. And your downstairs switch will be VLAN 2. And now we can segment the traffic into pieces. That's what VLANs do. It's a function of the switch. The switch is a function that the switch performs. And you can separate your VLANs based on technology. You could have all of your video surveillance in a VLAN, and you can manage them separately. You can have your wireless access in a VLAN and manage them separately. Or maybe you divide your VLANs up by department or something. Sales in one and marketing in another. That's the way Joe and Susan have done it. VLANs are a function of the switch, but VLANs are connected together not by a wire like this, but by something called a layer 3 switch. So let's introduce this thing. I warned you about the layer 3 switch, is that it would be a little complicated to understand, because immediately if you're thinking about what we learned before, wait a minute, I thought layer 3 was routers and that switches were layer 2. How can we have a layer 3 switch? Well, it's important. So what we have here, a layer 3 switch is a switch. It's a layer 2 device that can also function as a layer 3 device. And our switch here, what you see here is we have 8 ports. 4 of them we've configured in the switch to be a layer 3 switch. Layer 3 ports. These other 4 ports, they happen to be gigabit. This is a gigabit switch. And they happen to be, we're going to designate them as layer 2 ports. We have 4 layer 3 ports and 4 layer 2 ports on our layer 3 switch. So what we have here is a device that's functioning both ways. So we have to get rid of our cable, that cable there, and we're now going to connect our upstairs VLAN and our downstairs VLAN using the layer 3 switch. So we're going to plug in here to our uplink port and plug the other side into our layer 3 port. Then we'll connect our other VLAN exactly the same way and connect it up to the layer 3 switch. And now my 2 VLANs are connected together, as you can see. Now, a layer 3 switch, first of all, you know, and you've heard this before, that routers connect networks together. Routers connect networks together. And what I have here now are 2 networks. A VLAN is a network. And if I'm going to connect the 2 VLANs together, I have to have some routing functions. A layer 3 switch functions like a router to connect networks together, which means that it forwards packets based on the IP address, which also means now that every device in Susan and Joe's network now has to also have an IP address, not just a MAC address, but also an IP address to get them from one network to the other. And a layer 3 switch also functions as a layer 2 device. So it's a switch acting like a router. That's the layer 3 switch. Now, as an example here, if our VLAN 1 was on the first floor, but instead of the second floor, what if Susan's marketing department were up on the 22nd floor? Now, what problem do we have? The problem we have is that the UTP cable is no longer sufficient. It's going to take more than 100 meters of cable to get up there. So how do we do that? How do we get up to the 22nd floor? And the answer is fiber optic. And so we can pull the copper cable that connects the layer 3 switch up there and replace it with a fiber optic. So here's my fiber optic cable. Now I go to plug it in, but I have a problem. There's no place to plug in fiber optic into this thing. Remember SFP? So this is an SFP module for fiber. And so what I can do is I can plug my fiber optic into the SFP module, click it in there. And now my switches have an SFP module that I can plug into there. And I can connect now using fiber optic. Again, the reason for the SFP port. But Susan's not on the 22nd floor. She's on the 2nd floor. And so we're going to connect her appropriately. Layer 3 switch.